The morning started like any other Tuesday at Kensington Palace. Prince William woke up early, as was his habit, and quietly made his way to the kitchen without waking Catherine. The autumn sunlight filtered through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the marble floors. He had always found peace in these quiet morning moments before the day's royal duties began. William put the kettle on and checked his phone for the day's schedule. 3 official engagements, a charity meeting, and dinner with the children. Nothing seemed unusual about the day ahead. Catherine would join him for the second engagement, a visit to a children's hospital in London. It was the kind of work they both loved, seeing young faces light up despite their circumstances. As he sipped his tea, William's thoughts drifted to recent conversations he'd had with his father about the future of the monarchy. King Charles had been emphasizing the importance of connecting with ordinary people, of understanding their struggles and joys. "The crown means nothing if it doesn't touch hearts," his father had said just last week. Catherine appeared in the doorway, still in her dressing gown, her hair falling loosely around her shoulders. Even after all these years of marriage, William still felt that familiar flutter when he saw her first thing in the morning. She smiled sleepily and moved toward the coffee machine. "You're up early again," she said, her voice still thick with sleep. "Couldn't stay in bed. Too much on my mind, I suppose," William replied, watching as she went through her morning routine with practiced ease. They had learned to navigate the unusual pressures of their public life while maintaining some sense of normalcy at home. Their children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, were still asleep upstairs, blissfully unaware of the constitutional weight that would one day rest on George's shoulders. Catherine joined him at the small breakfast table they preferred over the formal dining room. They often chose these intimate moments over the grand spaces the palace offered. It felt more like the life they had built together at university, before titles and protocols became part of their daily vocabulary. "The children's hospital visit today," Catherine said, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. "I've been reading about some of the cases we'll see. There's a little girl, Emma, who's been asking specifically to meet us. She's 7 and has been battling leukemia for 2 years." William nodded, feeling the familiar mixture of privilege and responsibility that came with these encounters. They never took these meetings lightly. Each child they met left an impression. Each family story became part of their understanding of what their roles truly meant. "Her mother sent a letter through the hospital," Catherine continued. "Emma has been following our family in the news. She's particularly excited about meeting me because she wants to be a princess someday too. But not for the dresses or the crown. She wants to help sick children like herself." These were the moments that reminded William why their work mattered. Beyond the ceremonies and state functions, beyond the media attention and public scrutiny, there were real people whose lives intersected with theirs in meaningful ways. A 7-year-old girl fighting cancer who found inspiration in their story. After breakfast, they went through their morning routines separately. William showered and dressed in his usual dark suit, while Catherine chose a navy dress that was both appropriate for the hospital visit and approachable for the children they would meet. They had learned that their clothing choices mattered. Too formal and they seemed distant. Too casual and it might seem disrespectful to the occasion. Their protection officers briefed them on the day's logistics over a quick second cup of coffee. The hospital visit would last 3 hours, during which they would tour the children's cancer ward, meet with families, and participate in a small ceremony to unveil a new play area that had been funded through their charitable foundation. As they prepared to leave, William found himself thinking about his mother. Diana had made hospital visits like this look effortless, but he knew they had never been easy for her either. She had taught him, through her example, that true connection required vulnerability. You couldn't touch hearts while keeping your own protected. Catherine seemed to sense his thoughts. She had developed an intuition about his moods over the years, particularly when it came to memories of his mother. "She would be proud of what we're doing," Catherine said quietly, adjusting his tie with the casual intimacy of long marriage. "I hope so," William replied. "Sometimes I wonder if we're doing enough, if we're making the kind of difference she would have made." "We're making our own kind of difference," Catherine assured him. "That's what matters." Their car arrived precisely on time as royal cars always did. As they settled into the back seat for the journey to the hospital, William reflected on how their life together had evolved. From young university students to parents to senior working royals, each phase had brought new challenges and deeper understanding of their purpose. The London streets passed by outside their windows, ordinary people going about their ordinary lives, most unaware that the future king and queen were sharing the same roads. William often wondered about those lives, about the struggles and joys that existed beyond the palace walls. "Do you ever miss it?" he asked Catherine suddenly. "The anonymity, I mean, being able to walk down a street without anyone noticing." Catherine considered this for a moment. "Sometimes," she admitted. "But then I think about Emma, about all the children we'll meet today, and I realize that our visibility gives us opportunities that privacy never could. We can shine light on things that matter." As they approached the hospital, William saw the small crowd that had gathered despite the early hour. Word always somehow got out about their visits, no matter how much advanced security tried to maintain discretion. He could see children pressed against windows on upper floors, hoping for a glimpse of the royal visitors. The car pulled up to the main entrance, where hospital administrators and charity officials waited to greet them. William took a deep breath, feeling the familiar shift from private person to public figure that happened every time they stepped out for official duties. But today would be different from their usual engagements, though neither William nor Catherine could have predicted how profoundly different. Today, behind one simple door, waited a moment that would remind them both why their roles existed and what their hearts were truly meant to serve. The hospital corridors smelled of disinfectant and hope, a combination William had grown familiar with over years of similar visits. As they walked through the main entrance, flanked by hospital staff and their security team, he noticed how Catherine instinctively slowed her pace. She had developed this habit during their early royal visits together, taking time to make eye contact with people they passed, offering small waves to children peering around corners. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the hospital's chief pediatric oncologist, greeted them warmly. She was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes, and the sort of calm confidence that came from years of delivering both devastating and miraculous news to families. William had met many doctors like her, people whose daily work required them to balance clinical expertise with deep compassion. "Your Royal Highnesses, welcome to St. Mary's Children's Hospital," Dr. Mitchell said with a slight bow. "We're honored to have you here today. The children and families are so excited for your visit." As they began their tour of the pediatric ward, William was struck by the artwork covering the walls. Bright murals painted by previous young patients depicted fantastical worlds where children flew through rainbow skies and animals wore crowns. It was a reminder that imagination thrived even in places where childhood was interrupted by illness. Their first stop was the playroom, where about 20 children of various ages had gathered. Some were in wheelchairs, others had visible signs of treatment. Bald heads covered by colorful scarves or hats, pale skin, tired eyes that still somehow sparkled with curiosity. William felt the familiar tightness in his chest that came with these encounters. Each child represented a family's greatest fear and deepest love. Catherine immediately gravitated toward a group of younger children who were working on a puzzle together. Her natural ease with children had always amazed William. She didn't speak to them differently because they were sick. She spoke to them as she would any child, with genuine interest and playful energy. "Are you really a princess?" asked a little boy named James, who couldn't have been more than 5. His head was wrapped in a Spider-Man bandana, and he clutched a stuffed dinosaur under one arm. "I suppose I am," Catherine laughed, sitting cross-legged on the floor beside him. "But I'm also a mum, just like your mum, and I bet you're much braver than any princess in any story." William watched this interaction while talking with older children about their interests. A 12-year-old named Marcus was explaining his plans to become a doctor himself someday. "I want to help kids like me," Marcus said matter-of-factly. "I know what it feels like to be scared, so I think I could help them not be scared." These conversations always reminded William of the resilience of children, their ability to find purpose even in suffering. It was humbling and inspiring in equal measure. Dr. Mitchell guided them through several more areas of the ward. They visited the art therapy room, where children were creating masterpieces with watercolors and clay. They stopped by the small library, where volunteers read stories to patients who were too weak to hold books themselves. Each space had been designed to maintain some sense of childhood wonder, despite the medical realities. "There's one more area I'd like to show you," Dr. Mitchell said as they completed the main tour. "It's a special room we've set up for families who are facing particularly difficult times. It's meant to be a place where they can have privacy, where they can just be together without the noise and bustle of the hospital." She led them down a quieter corridor, away from the main ward activity. The lighting here was softer, the walls painted in calming blues and greens. William noticed that even the sound of their footsteps seemed muted on the specially designed flooring. "We call it the family sanctuary," Dr. Mitchell explained as they approached a door marked simply with a small placard reading, "Quiet Space." Sometimes families need a place to have difficult conversations, or to say goodbye, or simply to hold each other without interruption. We've found that having this dedicated space makes an enormous difference in how families experience their time here. William felt Catherine's hand slip into his as they approached the door. These were always the most challenging parts of their hospital visits, the reminders that not every story had a happy ending, that their presence, while meaningful to families, couldn't change medical realities. "There's actually a family in there now," Dr. Mitchell said quietly. "They've given permission for you to meet them, but please don't feel obligated. I know these situations can be—" "We'd like to meet them," Catherine said immediately, squeezing William's hand. "If they're comfortable with it, we're honored to." Dr. Mitchell nodded and approached the door. She knocked gently before opening it slowly. "The family I mentioned earlier is here," she said to whoever was inside. "Are you still feeling up to visitors?" A woman's voice, tired but warm, responded from within. "Yes, please. Emma's been waiting." William's heart jumped slightly. Emma, the 7-year-old Catherine had mentioned at breakfast, the little girl who wanted to be a princess to help sick children. He had been hoping they would have a chance to meet her, but he hadn't expected it to be here, in the sanctuary room. Dr. Mitchell opened the door wider and gestured for them to enter. "Your Royal Highnesses, I'd like you to meet the Morrison family." As William stepped into the room, he immediately understood why it was called a sanctuary. The space was warm and comfortable, with soft lighting and furniture that looked more like a living room than a hospital space. Large windows looked out onto a small garden where butterflies danced among carefully tended flowers. But it was the scene inside that took his breath away. A little girl with a beautiful bald head sat propped up in a hospital bed that had been wheeled in from another room. She wore a bright yellow dress with small flowers on it, and despite her obvious illness, her eyes were bright with excitement. Beside her bed sat a woman who was clearly her mother, holding the child's hand and smiling through what William recognized as barely contained emotion. On the other side stood a man, presumably Emma's father, who looked like he had been carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. But there were others in the room too, an elderly couple who must have been grandparents, a teenage boy who was probably Emma's brother, and several other children of various ages. As William's eyes took in the full scene, he realized this wasn't just a family visit. This was a gathering of everyone who loved this little girl. "Emma," her mother said gently, "these are the special visitors we talked about." Emma's face lit up with pure joy as she looked at Catherine. "You're even more beautiful than on television," she said in a voice that was weak but filled with wonder. "I told everyone you would come." William felt his throat tighten with emotion, but it was what happened next that would change everything. Catherine moved immediately to Emma's bedside, her royal training forgotten in the face of a child's genuine excitement. She took Emma's small hand in both of hers, and William watched as his wife's eyes filled with unshed tears at the fragility of the little fingers. "Emma, I've been so looking forward to meeting you," Catherine said, her voice soft but clear. "I heard you want to be a princess too." Emma nodded eagerly, though the movement seemed to tire her. "Not for the pretty dresses," she said seriously. "Though they are very pretty, I want to help children who are sick like me." "Mummy says you do that too." "We try our best," Catherine replied. "But I think you might be better at it than we are. You understand what it feels like in a way we never could." William introduced himself to Emma's parents, David and Sarah Morrison. David's handshake was firm but trembling slightly, and Sarah's eyes held the particular exhaustion that came from months of sleepless nights in hospital chairs. They were ordinary people facing an extraordinary challenge with remarkable grace. "Thank you for coming," Sarah whispered to William. "Emma has talked about nothing else since we told her you might visit. This means more to her than you could possibly know." As Catherine continued talking with Emma about princesses and helping others, William learned more about the family from David. They were from a small town outside London, where David worked as a mechanic and Sarah taught primary school. Emma had been diagnosed 18 months ago, and their world had been turned upside down ever since. "We've been living here, essentially," David explained quietly. "Sarah took leave from teaching, and the community has been incredible, raising money, taking care of our house, supporting us in every way imaginable. But Emma, she keeps everyone's spirits up. Even when she's having her worst days, she's more concerned about how we're feeling than how she's feeling." The teenager William had noticed was indeed Emma's older brother, 16-year-old Tom. He stood slightly apart from the group, clearly uncomfortable with the attention but staying close to his sister. William recognized the particular burden that fell on siblings in these situations. The way their childhood got pushed aside while parents focused on the sick child. The guilt they felt for being healthy. The fear of losing someone so important to them. "Tom," William said, approaching the young man, "this must be really hard for you too." Tom looked surprised that anyone had acknowledged him. "It's harder for Emma," he said automatically, the response of someone who had been told countless times not to complain about his situation. "It can be hard for everyone in different ways," William said gently. "That doesn't make your feelings less important." Something in William's tone seemed to crack Tom's carefully maintained composure. His eyes filled with tears he had probably been holding back for months. "I just want my little sister to be okay," he whispered. "She's the best person I know, and it's not fair." William put a hand on Tom's shoulder. "No, it's not fair, and it's okay to be angry about that." Meanwhile, Catherine had discovered that Emma had prepared something special for their visit. With her mother's help, Emma reached into a bag beside her bed and pulled out a handmade book. The cover was decorated with drawings of crowns and hearts, and the title read, "How to Be a Real Princess," in careful 7-year-old handwriting. "I made this for you," Emma said, offering the book to Catherine, "in case you forgot how to be a real princess while you were being so busy." Catherine accepted the book with reverence as if Emma had just handed her the crown jewels. She opened it carefully and began to read aloud the first page. "A real princess is kind to everyone, even when she doesn't feel good. A real princess listens when people are sad. A real princess shares her toys and her love." Each page contained simple but profound wisdom about kindness, courage, and love. The illustrations showed stick figures helping each other, sharing meals, and holding hands. It was the kind of pure truth that could only come from a child who had experienced both suffering and overwhelming love. As Catherine read, William noticed that everyone in the room had grown quiet. Emma's grandparents were holding hands, tears streaming down their faces. Tom had moved closer to his sister's bed. Even Dr. Mitchell, who must have witnessed countless emotional scenes, was visibly moved, but it was the final page that truly took William's breath away. In Emma's careful handwriting it said, "The most important thing about being a real princess is that you help people remember that love is stronger than being scared." Below the words was a drawing that made William's chest tighten with emotion. It showed 2 tall figures with crowns, clearly meant to be him and Catherine, standing beside a small figure in a hospital bed. But in Emma's imagination, the small figure was also wearing a crown, and rays of light emanated from all 3 crowned figures toward other small figures around them. Catherine finished reading and looked up at Emma with wonder. "This is the Most beautiful book I've ever read, she said, and William could hear that she meant every word. May I ask you something? Emma nodded eagerly. How did you learn to be so wise? Catherine asked. Emma considered this seriously. When you're sick a lot, you have time to think about what really matters, she said. And I have the best family and the best doctors and nurses, so I learned about love from them. Love is what makes you brave when you're scared. William felt something shift inside him as he listened to this conversation. Here was a 7-year-old girl facing the biggest challenge imaginable, and she had somehow distilled the essence of what their royal roles should be about. Not the ceremonies or the protocols, but the simple act of helping people remember that love is stronger than fear. Sarah Morrison had been watching William's face as he listened to her daughter. She's been asking us for weeks if you would come, Sarah said quietly. But this morning she told us something that surprised us. She said she had a very important job to do today, that she had something very important to teach you and the princess. What job was that? William asked, though he was beginning to suspect he already knew. Emma answered for herself, her small voice carrying surprising strength. I want to show you the secret about being royal, she said seriously. It's not about the crown you wear on your head. It's about the crown you wear on your heart. In that moment, as William looked at this remarkable child who had transformed her own suffering into wisdom about love and courage, he understood why he had felt compelled to open the sanctuary room door. Emma Morrison was about to teach them, both something they had never learned in any royal training, something that would change how they understood their purpose forever. Emma's words hung in the air like a gentle revelation. William found himself sitting down in the chair beside her bed, all royal protocol forgotten. This wasn't a formal visit anymore. This was a little girl sharing profound truth with 2 adults, who desperately needed to hear it. Tell me more about the crown on your heart, William said softly, leaning forward to give Emma his complete attention. Emma's eyes sparkled with the joy of a child who had found adults willing to listen to her most important thoughts. Well, she began, settling back against her pillows. When I first got sick, I was really scared all the time. The treatments hurt and I felt terrible and I couldn't do the things other kids could do. Catherine moved closer, perching carefully on the edge of the bed. She had completely forgotten about their schedule, about the other families waiting to meet them, about everything except this moment. But then I started noticing things, Emma continued, like how Mummy would sleep in that uncomfortable chair every night just to be near me, and how Daddy would drive 2 hours each way to work so he could still see me every day, and how Tom would bring me his favorite books to read, even though I knew he wanted to read them himself. Tom blushed from across the room, but his eyes were fixed on his sister with obvious adoration. And the nurses, Emma went on, her voice getting stronger as she talked about the people she loved. They work so hard, and sometimes they're tired, but they always find a way to make me smile. Nurse Jenny knows I like butterflies, so she draws one on my hand before every treatment. And Dr. Mitchell tells me jokes that aren't even funny, but I laugh because she's trying so hard to make me feel better. Dr. Mitchell laughed despite her tears. My jokes are hilarious, she protested gently. They are to me, Emma said loyally, making everyone in the room smile. William was beginning to understand what Emma meant about the heart crown, but he wanted to hear her explain it in her own words. Children had a way of cutting through complexity to reach the simple truth at the center of things. So what does all of that have to do with crowns? He asked. Everything, Emma said with excitement. See, when people choose to love you even when it's hard, even when it costs them something, even when they're scared too, that's when you know they have a crown on their heart. It's invisible, but it's more real than any crown made of gold and jewels. She paused, looking directly at Catherine. And when you choose to love people back, even when you're the one who's sick or scared, then you get a heart crown too. That's what makes you royal. Not being born into it, but choosing it every single day. Catherine reached for William's hand, and he could feel that she was trembling slightly. They had spent years learning about their constitutional roles, about the history and traditions of the monarchy, about their duties to the Commonwealth and the nation. But Emma was describing something entirely different, a kind of royalty that had nothing to do with bloodlines and everything to do with character. "Emma," Catherine said, her voice thick with emotion, "I think you understand what it means to be royal better than anyone I've ever met." Emma beamed at this praise, but then her expression grew more serious. "I want to tell you something else," she said. "Something the doctors told Mummy and Daddy that they think I don't know about." The adults in the room grew very still. David and Sarah exchanged a look that William recognized, the look of parents who had been trying to protect their child from difficult truths. "I know I'm probably going to die," Emma said matter-of-factly, with the strange clarity that sometimes comes to children facing mortality. "The treatments aren't working as well as everyone hoped they would." Sarah Morrison let out a small sob and moved to embrace her daughter, but Emma gently patted her mother's arm in comfort. "It's okay, Mummy," Emma said softly. "I'm not scared anymore." "Do you want to know why?" Through her tears, Sarah nodded. "Because I figured out what my job is," Emma explained. "My job isn't to get better, though I'm still trying really hard to do that too. My job is to help everyone remember about the heart crowns, to help people see that love is the only thing that really matters, and that even when bad things happen, love doesn't go away." William felt tears running down his own face now, something that rarely happened to him in public. But this wasn't really public anymore. This was sacred space where a little girl was sharing the wisdom that comes from facing life's biggest questions at an age when most children were worried about homework and playground friendships. "That's why I made the book for you," Emma continued, looking at Catherine. "Not because I thought you didn't know how to be a princess, but because I thought maybe sometimes grown-ups forget that the most important crowns are invisible ones." She turned to William then. "And I wanted you to know that when you help people, when you visit places like this hospital, you're not just doing your job as a prince. You're wearing your heart crown. That's what makes people feel better. Not meeting someone famous, but meeting someone who really cares." The room was quiet except for the soft sounds of people crying and breathing. William realized that Emma had just given him and Catherine a gift more valuable than anything in the royal collection, a complete redefinition of what their lives were supposed to be about. "Emma," he said finally, "would you do something for us?" "What?" she asked, curious. "Would you let us visit you again? Not as an official royal visit, but as friends who want to learn more about heart crowns?" Emma's face lit up with pure joy. "Really? You'd come back just to see me?" "We'd be honored to," Catherine said immediately, "if your parents say it's okay." David and Sarah Morrison nodded through their tears, clearly overwhelmed by the offer. "But I have to tell you something," Emma said, suddenly looking a bit worried. "If you come back, you have to promise me something." "Anything," William said. "Promise me that you'll remember about the heart crowns even after I'm gone. Promise me you'll help other people remember too. That's the most important thing, that the love doesn't stop just because one person goes away." William looked at Catherine, and in her eyes he saw his own commitment reflected back at him. They had come to this hospital to perform a royal duty, to bring comfort to sick children and their families. Instead, they had encountered a teacher who had shown them the true meaning of everything they had spent their lives preparing for. In the silence that followed Emma's request, William heard something that would echo in his memory forever. The sound of a 7-year-old girl teaching the future King of England what it really meant to wear a crown. The promise they made to Emma Morrison that day became the foundation for everything that followed. William and Catherine didn't just return to visit Emma, they returned every week for the next 3 months, sometimes bringing their own children, when hospital policies allowed, sometimes coming alone to sit quietly with Emma and her family during the hardest days. These visits were different from any royal engagement they had ever undertaken. There were no photographers, no formal protocols, no official record of their time spent in the sanctuary room. Instead, there were conversations about courage, laughter, shared over Emma's terrible jokes, and quiet moments when words weren't necessary at all. Emma's condition continued to worsen, but her spirit seemed to grow stronger with each passing week. She had appointed herself as William and Catherine's teacher in the art of heart crowns, and she took this responsibility seriously. During their visits, she would share observations about the other patients, the hospital staff, and even her own family that revealed an understanding of human nature far beyond her years. "You know what I noticed about Nurse Jenny today?" Emma said during one visit, propped up in her wheelchair as Catherine pushed her slowly through the hospital garden. "When she thinks no one is looking, she goes into the rooms where the babies are crying and just sits with them. Not because it's her job, but because she can't stand the thought of them being alone when they're scared." "That sounds like someone wearing a heart crown," Catherine agreed, stopping the wheelchair beside a bench where William was reading to a group of younger patients. "Exactly," Emma said with satisfaction. "And look at Prince William. He doesn't have to sit on the ground with those little kids, but he does it anyway because it makes them feel important. That's heart crown behavior." William looked up from the picture book he was reading and caught Emma watching him with approval. Over these months, he had stopped thinking about his dignity or his formal training when he was at the hospital. Emma had taught him that true dignity came from meeting people where they were, not expecting them to rise to meet some artificial standard. During their visits, Emma also shared her own struggles with remarkable honesty. She talked about the days when the pain was so bad she could barely speak, about her fear of leaving her family behind, about her frustration with being unable to run and play like other children. But she also talked about the unexpected gifts her illness had brought her, the depth of love she had discovered in her family, the friendships she had formed with other patients, the way her perspective on what mattered had been completely transformed. "Before I got sick," Emma told them one afternoon, "I used to cry when I didn't get the toy I wanted or when Tom wouldn't play with me. Now I know that crying about toys is silly. The only things worth crying about are love things. When people you care about are hurt, or when you might not see someone you love again." It was during their 8th visit that Emma made a request that surprised them both. She wanted to write letters, not to famous people or to world leaders, but to other children who were facing serious illnesses. She wanted to share what she had learned about heart crowns, about finding courage when you were scared, about the difference between being important and being royal. "I can't visit other hospitals like you can," Emma explained, "but I can write letters. And maybe some of those children will write letters to other children, and the heart crown idea will spread to lots of places." Catherine immediately offered to help Emma with this project, and soon they were spending parts of their visits working together on letters. Emma would dictate her thoughts, Catherine would help with the writing, and William would contribute ideas about how to reach children in other hospitals around the country. The first letter Emma wrote was to a boy named Marcus in Scotland who had lost his leg in an accident. "Dear Marcus," the letter began, "I heard that you're sad about your leg, and I wanted to tell you something important. Your leg doesn't make you who you are. What makes you who you are is how you choose to love people, especially when it's hard to love yourself." The response to Emma's letters was immediate and overwhelming. Children wrote back sharing their own stories, their own discoveries about courage and love. Parents wrote to thank Emma for giving their children a new way to think about their challenges. Hospital staff began requesting copies of Emma's letters to share with new patients. What had started as one little girl's insight about heart crowns was becoming a movement of sorts. Children teaching other children about resilience, compassion, and the true meaning of strength. But it was during their 11th visit that Emma shared her most important revelation with William and Catherine. She had been particularly weak that day, and the conversation had been quieter than usual. As they sat together in the sanctuary room, Emma suddenly looked up at William with unusual seriousness. "I figured out something really important," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What's that?" William asked, leaning closer to hear her better. "The reason God made me sick," Emma said simply. "It wasn't to punish anyone, and it wasn't because bad things just happen. It was so I could teach you and Princess Catherine about heart crowns, and so you could teach other people, and so those people could teach even more people." She paused, gathering her strength to continue. "My sickness was never really about me. It was about all the people who would learn about love because of what happened to me. That makes it worth it. That makes everything worth it." William felt his world shift on its axis as he listened to these words. Emma Morrison, 7 years old and dying, had just articulated a truth about purpose and meaning that theologians and philosophers had struggled to express for centuries. She had transformed her suffering into a gift for the world, and in doing so she had shown William and Catherine what their own purpose could become. "Emma," Catherine said, tears streaming down her face, "you are the most royal person I have ever met." Emma smiled, that radiant smile that had become so precious to them both. "We all are," she said simply. "That's what I learned. Every single person has a heart crown. They just have to choose to put it on." 3 days later, Emma Morrison peacefully passed away in her sleep, surrounded by her family and holding the handmade book she had given to Catherine. Her last words, according to her mother, were, "Tell the prince and princess that the heart crowns are everywhere now. Tell them to look for them." The funeral was a small, private affair, but William and Catherine were there, sitting with the Morrison family not as royalty, but as friends who had been forever changed by a little girl's extraordinary wisdom. As they listened to the eulogy celebrating Emma's short but profound life, they both knew that something fundamental had shifted in their understanding of what it meant to serve. 6 months after Emma's funeral, William stood before the door of another hospital room, but this time everything was different. He carried with him a small leather journal, Emma's original handmade book about being a real princess, which Sarah Morrison had insisted he and Catherine keep. Inside the front cover, Sarah had written, "For William and Catherine, who learned to see heart crowns everywhere. With love from Emma's family." This hospital was in Wales, and behind the door waited another child facing a serious illness. But William no longer approached these visits with the careful distance of royal protocol. Emma had taught him that genuine connection required vulnerability, that real comfort came from authentic presence, not polished performance. Catherine joined him in the corridor, carrying a small bag filled with art supplies and copies of letters from children around the world who had heard Emma's story. What had begun as one little girl's insight about heart crowns had grown into something neither William nor Catherine could have imagined. Children's hospitals across the United Kingdom had started heart crown programs, where young patients wrote letters to each other, sharing encouragement and wisdom born from their own experiences with illness and recovery. The project had expanded internationally when William and Catherine decided to make Emma's story the centerpiece of their annual Charity Foundation report. They had wrestled with whether to publicize something so personal, but ultimately decided that Emma's message was too important to keep private. The response had been overwhelming. Hospitals in dozens of countries had implemented similar programs, and children facing everything from cancer to rare genetic disorders were finding strength in Emma's simple truth about the crowns that mattered most. "Are you ready?" Catherine asked softly, noticing William's thoughtful expression. "I was just thinking about what Emma would say if she could see what's happened because of her," William replied. "All these children helping each other, all these families finding hope in her words." "She'd probably say that's what heart crowns do," Catherine smiled. "They spread love even when the person wearing them isn't there anymore." Inside the room, they found 8-year-old Oliver, who had been born with a complex heart condition requiring multiple surgeries. His parents, Maria and James, had requested this private meeting because Oliver had been following Emma's story and had something important he wanted to share with William and Catherine. Oliver was sitting up in his hospital bed, his chest bearing the visible scars of numerous operations, but his eyes bright with excitement at meeting his visitors. On the bedside table was a stack of letters, correspondence from other children around the world who had reached out to him after hearing about his own courage in facing repeated heart surgeries. "Your Royal Highnesses," Oliver said formally, then immediately broke into a grin. "I practice saying that, but Emma's book says the real way to talk to royal people is just to tell them what's in your heart." William and Catherine exchanged a look. Even in his nervousness, Oliver was channeling Emma's wisdom about authenticity over formality. "Then please, just tell us what's in your heart," Catherine said, sitting down beside his bed just as she had with Emma so many months ago. Oliver reached for a notebook filled with his own handwriting and drawings. "I've been writing letters to other kids who have heart problems like me," he began. And I figured out something Emma didn't put in her book, but I think she would have, if she'd had more time. He opened his notebook to a page that showed a drawing of children holding hands around the entire world. Heart crowns aren't just about being brave when you're sick, and they're not just about loving your family. They're about understanding that everyone is connected by invisible threads of love. Oliver's voice grew stronger as he explained his theory. See, when I got Emma's letter, the one you helped her write, I felt better not just because someone understood what it was like to be in the hospital, but because I realized I wasn't alone. And when I started writing to other kids, they wrote back, and they started writing to even more kids, and now there are thousands of us all connected. William felt the familiar sense of wonder that came with listening to children articulate profound truths in simple language. Tell me more about these invisible threads, he encouraged. Well, Oliver continued, clearly delighted to have such an interested audience. When someone shows you kindness, especially when you really need it, it's like they're attaching an invisible thread between your heart and theirs. And once that thread is there, it never goes away, even if you never see that person again. He pointed to his drawing. Emma attached threads to you and Princess Catherine, and you attached threads to me by coming here today, and I've attached threads to all the kids I've written letters to. Pretty soon, the whole world could be connected by these invisible love threads. Catherine felt tears welling up in her eyes as she realized what Oliver was describing. Emma's insight about heart crowns had evolved, through this remarkable boy's understanding, into something even more profound, a vision of human interconnectedness based on deliberate acts of love and compassion. Oliver, William said, I think Emma would be very proud of how you've built on her idea. In fact, I think you've discovered something that could change how people think about helping each other. Over the next hour, Oliver shared more of his correspondence with children around the world. There was Maria in Brazil, who had started a garden at her hospital where patients could grow flowers to give to each other. There was Ahmed in Egypt, who had organized a letter-writing program between sick children and elderly people in nursing homes. There was Lily in Australia, who had convinced her school to start a Heart Crown Day where students performed anonymous acts of kindness. Each story was evidence of Oliver's invisible thread theory in action. One act of compassion inspiring, another, creating an ever-expanding network of connection and care. As their visit came to an end, Oliver presented William and Catherine with a gift. It was a small wooden box, carved by his grandfather, containing dozens of tiny paper scrolls. Each scroll contained a letter from a child somewhere in the world, who had been touched by Emma's story and wanted to thank William and Catherine for sharing it. These are from kids who wanted you to know that they're wearing their heart crowns now too, Oliver explained. And they wanted you to remember that even when your official royal work feels hard or complicated, somewhere there's always a kid who believes in the kind of royalty that Emma taught us about. William opened one of the scrolls and read aloud. Dear Prince William and Princess Catherine, my name is Sophie and I'm 10 years old. I live in Canada and I don't have a serious illness, but I learned about Emma's heart crowns from my teacher. Now when I see kids at school who look sad or left out, I try to put on my heart crown and find ways to include them. Emma was right. The invisible crown is more powerful than any real crown. Thank you for teaching us this, love, Sophie. As they prepared to leave, Oliver made one final observation that would stay with William and Catherine for years to come. You know what I think the most amazing thing is about Emma's story, he said. She thought she was going to die without doing anything important. But actually, she did the most important thing anyone can do. She figured out how love really works, and then she made sure other people knew about it too. Walking back to their car through the hospital corridors, William and Catherine moved slowly, both lost in thought about everything they had heard and learned. The formal royal engagement that had started their journey months ago, the simple hospital visit that was supposed to last 3 hours, had become something that redefined their entire understanding of their roles, their marriage, and their purpose. Emma was right, Catherine said finally, breaking their comfortable silence. The crown on your heart really is more important than any crown made of gold and jewels. William nodded, thinking about all the children they had met, all the letters they had received, all the families whose lives had been touched by one little girl's extraordinary wisdom. And the most incredible thing is that she's still teaching people even now. Every child who learns about heart crowns, every act of kindness inspired by her story, every invisible thread of love that gets connected. It's all Emma, still spreading her gift to the world. As they drove away from the hospital, William realized that the profound royal moment Emma had given them that day, when he first opened the sanctuary room door, had never really ended. It had simply expanded, rippling outward through countless other doors, other hearts, other lives touched by the simple truth that love is indeed stronger than fear, and that the most important crowns are the ones that no one else can see.